That's the My Radio Show hotline. This man was the voice of the Los Angeles Kings Hockey Club for 44 years. He was honored by the Hockey Hall of Fame with the Foster Hewitt Memorial Award and as a member of the LA Kings Hall of Fame. Patrick, let's hear the tape.
Loose puck, Gretzky with it. Can't hold it. Taken away by Fox. Fox in front to the blue line to Hardy. He shoots. Save. Rebound. Score!
Oh, that gives me chills. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show Bob Miller. Hello, Bob.
Hi, Rick. How are you?
Oh, it's so great to talk to you, Bob. Listen, you retired in 2017 after such an incredible career. If you were calling games this season, how do you think you'd be handling this virus-induced work stoppage?
I'd be climbing the walls, ready to get this thing going again. But actually, I have the pleasure of being retired, and staying at home is no hardship for me. In fact, that's what I've been doing for a couple of years, and I enjoy it. So it's a whole different situation, and I just hope, and I have my doubts about whether we're trying to come back with all of these sports much too soon. I think Chip Kelly, the football coach at UCLA, said it best. If it's not safe for any fans to be in the stands to watch the games, why is it safe for the players, especially in contact sports?
Well, that's an interesting point. I know that there are players that actually go along with that. What do you think of the NHL's possible plan to resume hockey? They're talking about if we do this, that we'll just go straight to the playoffs.
Well, I think that's the way to do it, really. And I even have my doubts now. Do you really need to go to the playoffs and have all these players concentrated in two hub cities, of which Los Angeles is a candidate, but I don't know that it would be picked. But, there was no Gary Bettman canceled the whole season in 2004 and 5. No Stanley Cup playoffs, nothing. So I have my doubts as to why we are so anxious to have this Stanley Cup playoff this year. I know it's a tremendous trophy to win, but it's been canceled before in 1918 because of a flu pandemic. And so there's been precedent for just saying, look, let's end this season. Let's get started next year at the right time with the right amount of training camp, the right number of games, and everybody healthy, and have fans in the stands next season when we begin again. So, but they seem to have a real desire to present the Stanley Cup this year. And for some of the teams who had great seasons, I can see where they want to be involved. For the Kings, as you just mentioned, and the Ducks in your headlines, they've been eliminated now because the regular season is over.
Kings Hall of Famer Bob Miller on My Radio Show. Bob, you started back with the Kings in 1973, but you thought you had the job in 1972 when Jiggs McDonald left. What happened?
Well, Jack Kent Cooke got in the way, which he did in a lot of instances in his ownership of the Kings. Chick Hearn was the one who I had applied. He was in charge of finding a hockey announcer, and so I sent him some material. He called me back. I was doing University of Wisconsin hockey games at that time, and he said, I like your material, and you're my choice. So I thought, in 1972, I've got the job. And the months went by, and I didn't hear anything. And it was, I think, in August, somewhere around there, I was in Chicago for a Big Ten convention and ran into Don Anderson, who was the SID at USC. And I said, did the Kings name anybody yet? He said, yes, I saw it in the LA Times yesterday. They hired someone from KNX. And I thought, I wonder what happened. So I called Chick later, and Chick was really upset. He said, you mean nobody contacted you and told you what happened? I said, no. So he was upset about that. He said, well, you were my pick. But Mr. Cook said, I'm going to pick somebody else, a guy named Roy Story. And I think that's the way Mr. Cook operated a lot of times, Rick. If you suggested one guy, he would pick somebody else, in my opinion, just to show you I'm still the boss of this and I'm going to make the pick. And that's what he did. And then I understood from someone that they weren't happy with that pick, So I sent Chick some more material that if anything opens up, I'm still interested. And in 1973 in the summer, called me and said, come on out to L.A. and let's talk about your contract. So that's the way it happened.
And boy, were we lucky. Kings Hall of Fame broadcaster Bob Miller on my radio show. Bob, the Kings didn't win a cup with the actually, let me take you back. We had some great players back in the day. Marcel Dion, Rogie Vachon, who was my favorite player growing up, and then Bruce McNall takes over ownership, and that was followed by that huge trade that brought Wayne Gretzky to the Kings in 1988. What was the day like for you when you heard about that big trade?
Well, like most people, I couldn't believe that it was going to happen. I'd heard some rumors, and I had actually called Bruce McNall a few weeks before that, or a week before, trying to find out, is he going to sign him? But I didn't know whether to ask him that question or not. Maybe I was overstepping my bounds. But as we talked about how many games were going to be on TV and everything, I decided, well, I'm going to go for it. So I said, Bruce, are you going to sign Wayne Gretzky? And he said, tell me what you think of this. We're going to change our colors, going to change our uniforms, and the model of the new logo and uniform will be Wayne Gretzky. I said, if you pull that off, it'll be unbelievable. And he said, I think we're going to get it done. I couldn't believe it. So the Monday of the week that they announced it, I went into the forum, and Jerry West, who was then the GM of the Lakers, whispered to me, come here. So I went over, and he whispered in my ear, the deal is done. I said, how do you know that? He said, well, I played golf yesterday with someone who knows. The deal is done. I just thought in my head, this is going to move the Kings from a team that a lot of people did not care about necessarily, right to the top of the NHL in the entire North America, U.S. and Canada, in popularity, and it did. When they made that announcement, there were so many people calling for season tickets, they had to add extra people to answer the phones, and they would say, I need 4 season tickets. And the seller would say, we're not sure what the price will be. And the person would say, I don't care. Here's my credit card number. Put me down for 4 tickets. And that's the way it went because people wanted to see the greatest player in the history of the game, greatest scorer in the history of the game. So it was exciting with all the Hollywood people and celebrities showing up for Kings games.
You know, at that time, I was doing a sportscast in L.A. On TV, and very tongue-in-cheek, I would say, L.A. is a hockey town. Right after that trade, I'd say, oh, you know, L.A. is a hockey town because, as you know, hockey was sort of in the shadows of all the other sports in L.A. And the feeling at the time, Bob, was that, and you can tell me, this was kind of the theory or the and I don't want to say conspiracy theory, but there was a lot of chatter that the purpose of that deal, and it may have been orchestrated by the NHL, was to try to build an interest in the United States that would be comparable to Canada, and that it had to happen in Los Angeles. Do you think it was that well thought out, or was this just the case of a great trade on the part of the Kings?
Well, I'm not sure how much the NHL was involved in the trade, but the result was exactly what you mentioned, Rick. It moved the Kings to a priority position in the NHL, and you know, it was headlines throughout the world. I say it was the greatest trade ever made because I don't know of another player who was that dominant in his sport in the prime of his career that got traded. You know, people say, well, Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth was a pitcher with Boston. He wasn't the home run hitter we later knew with the Yankees. And there were some others in the NBA and NHL and NFL, but I don't think of players that had quite that impact that Gretzky had on his sport and his domination of his sport. So
the Kings made it to their first Stanley Cup Finals in 1993 when they met Montreal. Now, was that the most excitement you had ever seen over the Kings in Southern California?
Yes, and I think today is the 30th anniversary of the win over Toronto in Game 7, which put the Kings in the Stanley Cup Final against Montreal in 93. And so this is kind of an anniversary day for that event. And that was a great series, the semifinal series with Toronto, where the Kings had to win to move to the Stanley Cup final. And I'll tell you one little story. After the Kings did win that Game 7, we went to Montreal, and I went to the hotel to get my press credentials for the final. And coming down in the elevator afterwards, there was another woman in there and myself, the only two in there. And the woman said to me, "Can you tell me what is the Stanley Cup?" I thought, wait a minute, I'm in Montreal. They've won 24 of these things. I was looking for Alan Funt and Candid Camera in the elevator.
You thought you were being pranked. Kings Hall of Famer Bob Miller on my radio show. Bob, the Kings didn't win a cup with the great one, but they did win two in 2011 and 2012 in the 2013-2014 season. That was almost 40 years into your Kings career. What took you so long?
Oh, I'm just a slow learner of how to win those things, But that was really exciting. And, of course, the first one in 2012 just came out of nowhere because the Kings did not have a great season that year. Fired the coach in the middle of the year, brought in Darryl Sutter. And then when the playoffs started, just went right through all those divisions with a 3-0 lead in every series or through every series, a 3-0 lead. And won with a 16-4 record to win the Stanley Cup in the playoffs. And it was almost easy. I know it wasn't, but it seemed easy. And some of the players said, we didn't think it would be this easy. Well, 2 years later in 2014, it wasn't that easy because they had to come from a 3-0 deficit against San Jose to win that series and win 3 Game 7s in the first 3 rounds of that playoff year. So it was 2 different years for sure.
I say it all the time that, as a guy who grew up here in Southern California, that we have been blessed to have the most amazing play-by-play announcers on the planet. Vin Scully, of course, with the Dodgers, Chick Hearn with the Lakers, and you, Bob Miller, with the Kings. But, you were stuck sort of in the shadows of Vinny and Chicky Baby by virtue of the popularity of their sports. Did the three of you guys pal around?
Not so much. I mean, Chick was obviously a good friend, having gotten me the job with the Kings. We would talk on the phone, but I think what happened there, Vin would be off when we were playing, and we'd be playing when Vin was off, and he'd be working when we were off. So we didn't socially hang around, but I was friends with them and felt I could call them anytime, especially Chick, because we were working for the same person for many of those seasons, Jack Kent Cooke. So I would call Chick and say, Chick, I got this situation, and he'd give me a little advice there. So I valued his friendship and his advice. I still see Vin around once in a while. We were on a TV panel show one time with Bill McDonald doing the interview, and it was Vin and Chick and myself. And at one point, there was a lull in the conversation, and I said to Bill McDonald, look at the rings on these two guys' fingers. And Vin held his up and said, this is the World Series, 1988. Chick said, this is the NBA Championship, 1987. Now the camera came to me, and we hadn't won anything then. So I held up my other hand and said, this is my wedding ring, 1963. So, a lot of people remember that.
Listen, that's a championship, Bob, by the way. Married that long.
Vin said, well, you got the best of all of us.
What do you think? Do you ever wonder, because, and I mean this not because you're on the show, I've always thought that your work was among the greats when it comes to play-by-play. Do you ever think that things might have been different for you had you been a hockey announcer in, say, Boston or Chicago or Philadelphia?
Well, I think in my mind what would have happened there, I would have been having the opportunity to do more national telecasts because they seem to pick players from back or announcers from back in that area. But I really enjoyed being with one team for that many years. I don't know if I would have enjoyed traveling around to do 2 teams tonight, 2 more teams the next night, where I really didn't have a vested interest in whether they won or lost. I liked the fact that even though there were some peaks and valleys, that you were with one team and you were really invested in the success of that team or the team that did not have success. But I enjoyed that more than say, okay, I got a game tonight and I really don't care who wins. I wanted to go there and really be involved in the outcome of those games.
Listen, I want to, before I let you go, I want to give you a big thank you. I never had a chance to thank you for what was a real difficult moment for all of us when we lost a dear friend, sportscaster Stu Nahan, who was a huge hockey fan, as you know, and played hockey himself. And, when he passed away, you had to be the bearer of that news. And I remember listening to my voicemail and getting that message from you and thinking, oh, what a rough moment that had to be for you. Knowing how much he meant to all of us. And I wanted to thank you for that. I never had a chance to say thanks. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much. It was a sad day. He was a great friend, a great sportscaster here in L.A. And you mentioned he played hockey. And at his memorial, I said, he played hockey. And one game, the scouts came to look at him, and he got beat 8-1. And he was so despondent, giving up that many goals, that he tried to commit suicide. And they all gasped. I said, yeah, he jumped in front of a bus, but it went right between his legs.
Well, trust me, we never could get enough of reminding him of the fact that he played when they didn't wear masks as a keeper, as a goaltender. So,
right.
Listen, Bob, we miss you. Thank you for all the great Kings memories, ladies and gentlemen. Kings Hall of Fame announcer Bob Miller on my radio show with Rick Garcia. Thank you, Bob. Take care.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, coming up, you want baseball highlights? We have them coming up in Rick's replay, but you better bring an interpreter. Plus, the time Charles Barkley was drunk while playing an NBA game. And we're going to give away some free stuff. You're listening to my radio show with Rick Garcia.